Hi, this is Mark News from Plant Talk Radio. Thanks for subscribing and listening to our podcast, Your Gardening Questions from Plant Talk Radio. To keep this podcast free, we're partnering with Stoke Seeds. Pre-plan your indoor seed starting program today with the help of Stoke's 2018 Gardening Guide and their online articles. Whether you're adding texture through foliage, choosing a new variety for a splash of color, developing an existing garden, or starting from scratch, Stoke Seeds has some great catalog and online resources to help you through the process. More than just a listing of vegetable and flower seeds, the Stoke Seeds website is a complete resource center with valuable information on seed starting, planting, and harvesting, plus all the gardening accessories you need to make your garden the envy of the neighborhood. Get growing with Stokes. Now, today's question.
So, Fred, we talked about outdoor plant care. What about indoor plant care?
Well, indoor plant care is a bit of a different thing. We're dealing with an artificial setup, period, because the indoor plants are usually of a tropical origin or grow best there, maybe, if you want to put it that way. People are familiar with the zones. We're in primarily zone 6 anymore, according to some authorities, but 5 or 6. And those numbers, for example, 5 means, I believe it is, the temperature can go down to 0, or it's 10 below, and zone 6, it can go down to 0 degrees without being harmful to plants. And that I should remember that exactly. But at the same time, that's outdoor things. And that is the above ground parts of the plants. We move then indoors, and we have usually tropicals of some nature or other, be it the kinds that hang out of the pots or stand tall in the pots and so on. I'm going to throw them all together as being in an environment that is, like I mentioned earlier, drier than the Sahara Desert. This is not their forte. Many of these plants will be those that grow lower and or on the ground levels of a tropical forest. So they get a lot of shade above. The shade, the presence of the trees causes there to be a higher humidity under the trees. So they're used to a higher humidity. They are probably, in most parts, used to being overwhelmingly watered at certain points of the year and then kind of sparse other points. We have to work with the artificial cycle that they grow in. Number one, if you can, go down to the basement or wherever and turn up the humidifier on your furnace, if you have one. That's always a good place to start. If you wish and you're having trouble with some plants, you can take them into maybe a spare bedroom or what have you that is kept at 50 or above, some good light so they at least get along with the minimum, and then set up the cold water vaporizers, just like you'd use for a kid with a croup.
Sure.
All right. Then you have to recognize that in the wintertime, the light of day is less in length. Now, you can go to the store anymore and buy some fantastic hydroponic lighting and plant care systems that make it as brilliant as the middle of summer. But many of us don't quite go that far. So you have to consider then keeping the plant in balance. If it's not going to be growing very fast because of the circumstances, then don't overwater it. One of the things that I almost always do is take a plant home, whatever, in its container, and then I will get a tray of maybe an inch or inch and a half high, a dish, a tray, whatever you want to call it, and plant containers for that purpose, and put gravel in the bottom, maybe a half an inch thick or deep, I should say, or maybe an inch, depending on the size of walls. I will keep water in that gravel area, so it's there not to water the plant per se, but it's there to evaporate and let some humidity come up through the plant in a relatively quiet, air-moving room. Then I also will be very careful about watering. Number one, that same plant that I take home and put in the gravel tray may be in a decorative pot. That decorative pot has to drain the same as the container the plant came in. Because you water, then there's going to be inevitably some excess to run off into the gravel, etc. And it keeps it from building up. Because, for example, the poinsettia is that some people are still saving from after Christmas and looking pretty darn good for that matter, is a plant that you cannot allow it to go dry. It just flat won't tolerate that. But you can't keep it wet. So, what kind of an oxymoron is this? Just simply know that probably once a week, every 10 days, you need to soak the plant thoroughly. Even to the extent if it's a plant of any kind that you can lift out of its container, take it to the sink that's halfway full, set the pot right down in the water, maybe even deeper than the soil inside. Let it soak up water until it quits bubbling. Then set it over on the drain rack, let the excess run out, then put it back in its beautiful container, all of which can be done in the course of one day or half a day, whatever the timing might be, all of them at once or otherwise. And you know then that it had to have been watered. You know that it won't be standing in excess. And you know, based on where you have it in the house, when you check to see about moisture, that it's going to be 10, 14, or maybe as little as 7 days, depending on the kind of plant, where it is, the amount of light, and so on. So you can create, you can take a plant that's artificially grown here, so to speak, and put it into an artificial set of circumstances and keep it in good shape.
Is it poinsettias the one that they recommend ice cubes for?
Well, that would work. However, they're pretty sensitive to temperature. I think what you're probably aware of at this point, orchids have become a pot plant, and many orchids are very inexpensive anymore. Not some of the fancy ones, but still, they will be the kind of plant that, in the smaller containers, I think it's 3 ice cubes a week.
Okay.
Now, orchids, many of them at least, can handle the moisture a little bit in excess and a little too cold for a short time. But those ice cubes will probably be gone in less than a day.
Right.
They will deliver 2 or 3 tablespoons of water only. It dissipates out through the moss that the plants are in, and they're just as happy as they can be. Now, if you were to take the same orchid outdoors and let it sit around at 28 degrees, it's dead as a doorknob.
Sure.
But you can use ice. I prefer to think in terms of 3 tablespoons, direct tepid water as being the best bet. But yeah, they're really easy to handle anymore.
Thanks again for listening to the podcast. Remember, pre-plan your indoor seed starting program with the help of Stokes Gardening Guide and their online resources. And request your free catalog while you're online. For the best selection of vegetable, flower, and herb seeds available, go to stokeseeds.com. Cultivating successful growers for generations.